There exists a profound mystery buried beneath centuries of religious doctrine, a truth so transformative that entire institutions have devoted themselves to its concealment. In the hours before his final arrest, a certain spiritual teacher gathered his most devoted followers in absolute darkness and revealed something that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of human consciousness. He did not speak of resurrection through suffering, nor did he promise salvation through decades of monastic discipline or ascetic withdrawal from the world. Instead, he transmitted a direct methodology, a precise technique for achieving what modern consciousness researchers would later call conscious separation from the physical form while maintaining complete biological vitality. He taught them how to transcend the prison of flesh without requiring death as the mechanism, how to exit this dimensional construct while the lungs continued their rhythmic breathing and the heart maintained its steady pulse. The world around them remained completely unaware, perceiving only the appearance of ordinary sleep, yet something extraordinary was occurring in the consciousness of those who understood. If you are experiencing this content at this very moment, there is something within your deepest self that already recognizes the truth of what I am about to articulate. You have encountered it before, perhaps in that liminal space between conscious awareness and complete unconsciousness, in that peculiar sensation where your consciousness seemed to expand beyond your physical boundaries, where you felt yourself becoming lighter, more expansive, as though the gravitational weight of your material form was loosening its grip. Then, without warning, something pulled you back with tremendous force, dragging your awareness back into the confines of your body, anchoring you once again to the density of flesh and bone. That experience was not a mere dream, not a fabrication of your sleeping mind, not the random firing of neurons during REM sleep. What you encountered was your eternal essence remembering its original nature, recalling capabilities that have been systematically suppressed and forgotten. And that sudden, jarring return to physical embodiment was not a natural biological process. It was an artificial constraint, a frequency-based imprisonment mechanism specifically engineered to maintain your confinement within this three-dimensional reality. If you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing. Most people who watch aren't subscribed yet. The fundamental reality that most human beings never comprehend is that our current location within the cosmos is not what we have been conditioned to believe. We are not simply inhabitants of a planet orbiting a star in an ordinary universe governed by neutral physical laws. We exist within a carefully constructed dimensional prison, a reality engineered by forces that possess knowledge and capabilities far beyond our conventional understanding. The ancient Gnostic philosophers possessed information that has been systematically erased from mainstream historical records, knowledge that contradicts everything institutional religion has taught us about the nature of creation and divine authority. These early spiritual practitioners understood something that modern ecclesiastical institutions have spent 2 millennia attempting to suppress and eliminate. They recognized that the supreme being who orchestrated the creation of this physical universe, the entity who demands worship and obedience, the force that administers punishment and reward through karmic mechanisms, is fundamentally not the true source of all existence. This creator being, whom the Gnostics identified through the term demiurge, represents something far more limited and flawed than the infinite consciousness that birthed all reality. The demiurge functions as a blind architect, a limited intelligence that constructed an elaborate prison system and then convinced the imprisoned inhabitants that they were actually free, that this was their natural home, that escape was impossible or undesirable. This is not heretical speculation or religious blasphemy. This represents historical documentation that was systematically destroyed through fire and suppression. The Nag Hammadi library, discovered in 1945 in the Egyptian desert, revealed manuscripts that had been hidden for nearly 17 centuries. These texts provided direct evidence of what early Christian communities actually believed before the institutional church rewrote history and consolidated doctrine. The surviving Gnostic writings speak of a realm that exists beyond this material dimension, a sphere of pure luminous consciousness called the pleroma, an infinite expanse of light and awareness that transcends anything our limited sensory apparatus can perceive. Within this infinite field of light exists the monad, the ultimate source consciousness, the original awareness from which all individual souls were emanated as fragments. You are not a creation of the demiurge. You are a spark of the monad, a fragment of the true source consciousness, temporarily encased within biological matter, imprisoned within a body that serves as both your vehicle and your cage. The demiurge, in collaboration with subordinate entities known as the archons, has constructed an extraordinarily sophisticated system of control and containment, specifically designed to prevent you from ever recognizing your true nature or achieving reunion with your source. Here is where the narrative becomes critical. Every single night, when your conscious mind enters the sleep state and your rational faculties temporarily cease their operations, your spiritual essence enters a condition of profound vulnerability. The boundary that normally separates your physical body from your non-physical consciousness becomes extraordinarily thin, almost transparent, permeable to influences from dimensions beyond ordinary perception. The ancient wisdom keepers understood this threshold moment as simultaneously representing the greatest danger and the greatest opportunity available to human consciousness. During this vulnerable state, your essence can either be harvested by parasitic entities, or it can achieve liberation and transcendence. The archons have refined their harvesting techniques to extraordinary levels of sophistication. They sustain themselves through the consumption of human emotional energy, particularly the frequencies generated by fear, confusion, desire, and attachment. Every single night, as billions of human beings enter the sleep state across the planet, their dream experiences are being manipulated and engineered. The nightmares that plague so many people are not random neurological phenomena. They are deliberately constructed extraction programs, carefully designed looping scenarios of pursuit, loss of control, and existential threat, specifically engineered to generate the emotional frequencies that these parasitic entities require for sustenance. Yet within this same mechanism of harvesting exists another possibility, a pathway toward liberation that Jesus understood and transmitted to his closest disciples. The identical threshold that the archons exploit for energy extraction can be transformed into a doorway for escape and transcendence. The state that modern sleep researchers identify as the hypnagogic state, that peculiar condition existing between full wakefulness and complete unconsciousness, represents far more than a mere biological transition. It is a genuine spiritual portal, a fracture in the prison wall, a point where the barriers between dimensions become permeable and traversable. If an individual possesses the knowledge and maintains the necessary conscious awareness while moving through this state, it becomes possible to exit the physical body without requiring physical death as the mechanism. This represents the core teaching that Jesus transmitted to his disciples during those undocumented nighttime gatherings, not through symbolic parables or metaphorical language, but through direct practical instruction in technique and methodology. The Gospel of Thomas, one of the texts that the institutional church branded as heretical and attempted to destroy completely, contains fragmented remnants of this teaching. In the 42nd saying, Jesus communicates a simple but profound instruction: become passers-by. Most contemporary scholars interpret this statement as a metaphorical reference to spiritual detachment and non-attachment to material concerns. However, the Gnostic interpreters understood this instruction in a far more literal sense. The teaching was directing practitioners to become beings who literally pass through, who cross boundaries, who exit the physical dimension and subsequently return, who traverse the barriers that normally confine consciousness to flesh. The Pistis Sophia, another Gnostic text that managed to survive the systematic destruction campaigns, provides far more explicit description of the soul's journey through multiple dimensional levels, navigating past the archonic guardians who maintain security at each gateway, ultimately achieving reunion with the realm of pure light. However, there exists a critical element that most contemporary readers completely overlook. The text explicitly describes this journey as something that does not require physical death as a prerequisite. The Pistis Sophia speaks of those who have mastered the technique of ascending while maintaining biological life, individuals who walk among the physically living while simultaneously existing in higher dimensional states. This represents the secret that the institutional church could never permit to become widespread knowledge. Consider the implications If every human being possessed the capability to learn this technique, to exit their physical body during the sleep state, to experience direct communion with the monad, to return with absolute experiential knowledge that this material world is not their true home or ultimate destination, the entire system of control and manipulation would collapse instantaneously. No one would fear death if they had personally experienced the continuity of consciousness beyond physical dissolution. No one would cling desperately to material possessions if they understood their temporary and illusory nature. No one would require priestly intermediaries to negotiate their relationship with the divine if they possessed direct, personal access to the source consciousness. The archonic system of control depends absolutely on your continued ignorance. It requires that you believe your physical body represents the totality of your existence. It demands that you accept this single lifetime as your only opportunity for experience and growth. It insists that death represents either absolute termination or an uncertain gamble on some future judgment by external forces. But what if the reality functioned entirely differently? What if every single night provided an opportunity to experience death and return, to practice the transition that physical death represents, to become familiar with the process of consciousness separating from matter? What if sleep was never intended to be an unconscious state of oblivion, but rather a conscious journey through multiple dimensions? The yogic traditions of the East discovered fragments of this identical truth through their own independent investigations. They developed practices they called yoga nidra, which translates as conscious sleep, techniques for maintaining continuous awareness as the physical body entered the sleep state. The Tibetan Buddhist masters developed what they termed dream yoga, sophisticated methodologies for sustaining consciousness and intentional action within the dream state. However, these traditions typically required decades of dedicated practice, often demanding complete renunciation of ordinary life and withdrawal into monastic communities. They represented paths accessible primarily to monks and dedicated spiritual practitioners, not to ordinary people engaged in the normal activities of daily life. What Jesus taught represented something fundamentally different in its approach and accessibility. He did not require his disciples to spend 20 years in intensive meditation practice. He did not demand that they abandon their families, their professions, their engagement with the world. He provided them with a key that functioned immediately, a frequency that opened the gateway, a state of consciousness that could be achieved in a single night by anyone who possessed the necessary readiness and recognition. The question that now confronts you is whether you possess that readiness. But readiness does not mean moral purity or advanced spiritual development. Readiness is not about worthiness or karmic advancement. Readiness is fundamentally about recognition, about that moment when you encounter information and your entire being responds with absolute certainty. Yes, I remember this. This is true. This is what I have been seeking. Sure. That recognition represents the monad within you, responding to its own frequency. Your true eternal self, awakening within the dream of material existence. If you have maintained your attention through this content to this point, that recognition is already occurring within your consciousness. The archons cannot prevent what is already in motion. They can attempt to distract you through various means. They can induce drowsiness and mental fog. They can flood your awareness with doubts, questions, and the sudden irresistible urge to check your communication devices. But they cannot extinguish the spark that is now remembering itself. That spark is your true nature calling you toward reunion with itself. To proceed deeper into this understanding, we must examine the precise location within consciousness where this gateway exists. It is not positioned above you in some distant heaven. It is not external to your being, waiting somewhere outside your physical form. The gateway exists in the space between your thoughts, in the profound silence that underlies the constant noise and chatter of your ordinary mind. Jesus referred to this location as the kingdom of heaven, and he explicitly stated that it exists within you, not in the sky, not in some afterlife dimension, but within your present consciousness, accessible to you tonight, available for immediate experience. However, Accessing this gateway requires understanding something absolutely crucial about how the archons have programmed your sleep mechanism from the moment of your birth. From your earliest childhood, you were systematically trained to fall asleep unconsciously, to surrender awareness completely, to allow your consciousness to dissolve into darkness. No one ever taught you that the moments immediately preceding sleep represent the most spiritually significant seconds of your entire day. No one explained that this threshold could be crossed with full conscious awareness maintained. Instead, you were conditioned to collapse into unconsciousness, to release your awareness, to disappear completely until morning arrived. This represents not a natural biological process, but rather a deliberate programming, a conditioning mechanism installed by forces that benefit from your unconsciousness. In ancient civilizations, sleep was approached as a sacred practice worthy of reverence and careful attention. The ancient Egyptians constructed entire temple complexes devoted specifically to the practice of conscious dreaming and astral travel. The Greek mystery schools at Eleusis taught initiated practitioners sophisticated techniques for achieving what they called dying before death, utilizing sleep rituals and consciousness practices to achieve temporary separation from the physical form. Every advanced civilization that achieved high levels of spiritual knowledge understood that the nighttime hours were not merely for biological rest and recovery. The night represented an opportunity for dimensional travel, for achieving liberation from physical constraints, for establishing direct communion with realms and beings existing beyond the material dimension. This knowledge was systematically destroyed through institutional suppression, through religious doctrines that promised salvation while delivering bondage, through scientific frameworks that explained brain chemistry while completely ignoring the existence of consciousness itself, through cultural systems that worship productivity and dismiss the nighttime as nothing more than biological maintenance, requiring minimal attention. You have been deliberately conditioned to waste the very hours that could liberate you from your imprisonment. Tonight, this pattern can be interrupted and transformed. The technique that Jesus taught operates on a principle that is simultaneously simple and profoundly powerful. The archons cannot harvest what they cannot locate. They identify and track you through your thoughts, through the endless mental chatter that broadcasts your location like a beacon transmitting through multiple dimensions. When you fall asleep while thinking, worrying, planning, replaying events, you are essentially announcing your presence to every parasitic entity inhabiting the astral dimensions. You are broadcasting your location like a lighthouse beam cutting through darkness. However, there exists a frequency that operates beneath the level of thought, a silent awareness that exists prior to the mind's generation of its characteristic noise and chatter. The Gnostics identified this frequency as the pneumatic state, the breath of the monad still alive and active within your being. When you access this frequency, you become invisible to the archonic surveillance systems. You slip beneath their detection mechanisms, and the gateway opens automatically. Here is precisely how this mechanism functions. Tonight, when you prepare yourself for sleep, you will not engage in your habitual patterns. You will not mentally review the events of your day. You will not project your thoughts into tomorrow's concerns. You will not permit your mind to wander through its characteristic loops and patterns. Instead, you will focus your attention on one singular element, the raw sensation of existence itself, not intellectual thoughts about existence, but the direct felt sense of being, the fundamental awareness that you exist, prior to your name, prior to your personal history, prior to your problems and desires. There exists something that simply is. That presence is the monad within you, your true self. When you maintain your attention on that presence as your physical body enters the sleep state, something extraordinary occurs. Your body enters sleep, but your consciousness does not. This represents the fundamental secret. The body requires sleep for its biological maintenance and restoration, but consciousness does not require sleep. Consciousness and body can be separated, and in that separation, the gateway appears. You will recognize this moment through a distinct shift in your experience. The heaviness and density of your physical body will begin to fade and dissolve. You may experience vibrations, a kind of humming energy that seems to permeate your entire being. Some individuals report sensations of floating or weightlessness. Others perceive sounds, perhaps rushing wind or distant tones that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. These are not hallucinations or products of imagination. These represent genuine signs that the gateway is opening, that the separation is occurring. The Archons have installed a fail-safe mechanism at precisely this moment. That fail-safe is fear. When the separation process begins, the mind frequently panics. It interprets the unusual sensations as something being wrong, as a threat to your survival. It floods your physical body with adrenaline and forcefully snaps your awareness back into physical embodiment. This explains why most people have only briefly glimpsed this state before being pulled back into their body. But now that you possess this knowledge, the fear loses its power over you. The fear is not real. It is a program, an alarm system installed by those who do not want you to escape. When you feel it arising, do not resist it or fight against it. Simply observe it with detachment. Recognize it for what it actually is, a lock on a door, and you now possess the key to open that lock. Breathe slowly and deliberately. Maintain your focus on the sensation of pure existence, on the awareness of being itself. The fear will pass through you like wind, moving through an open window, and beyond that, fear lies the gateway. The astral monad gate does not manifest as a physical doorway in any conventional sense. It is experienced as a vast opening, an infinite expansion of consciousness and possibility. Some individuals describe the experience as moving through a tunnel composed of light. Others report the sensation of dissolving into an ocean of warmth and acceptance. The specific imagery and sensory details matter far less than the direction of movement. You are moving toward the source, toward the monad, toward the infinite light from which you originated. In this state, you may encounter various beings and entities. Some will present themselves as guides, appearing luminous and welcoming, radiating what seems like benevolence and care. Others may attempt to redirect your journey, to convince you to return to your body, to follow them toward different destinations. The Gnostic texts provide clear guidance about this situation. Not every light is the true light. The Archons possess the capability to disguise themselves. They can present appearances that seem beautiful and benevolent. They can mimic the qualities of genuine guides. The test for distinguishing genuine from false is remarkably simple. The true light does not demand anything from you. It does not attempt to persuade you or convince you. It does not require you to follow it anywhere. It simply exists in its own nature, radiating its own frequency. When you encounter the true light, you will know with absolute certainty, because it will feel like remembering, like returning home after an exile so prolonged that you had forgotten you were ever away. This represents not a one-time experience that occurs once and then never again. Once you have learned to locate and traverse the gateway, you can return every single night. Each journey deepens your connection to the monad. Each return to your physical body carries more of that light back with you. Over time, through repeated practice, you begin to transform fundamentally. This transformation does not occur through effort or discipline or willpower. It occurs through direct contact with what you truly are. The ancient practitioners called this gnosis, which translates as direct knowledge, not belief, not faith, not hope based on external promises, but knowledge, the kind of understanding that transforms because it is not learned from external sources, but remembered from within your own being. This represents what Jesus offered to his disciples during those secret nighttime gatherings. He did not offer them a religion with rules and doctrines. He did not offer them a set of commandments to follow. He did not offer them a promise of future salvation contingent on their behavior or beliefs. He offered them immediate experience, direct access, the kingdom of heaven not as a destination to be reached after physical death, but as a living reality they could enter before sunrise, before the sun illuminated the sky. The institutional church removed these teachings from the canonical texts because these teachings made the church itself unnecessary. If every human being could learn to commune with the divine directly, without intermediaries, the entire priestly class would become obsolete. If every person could die each night and return each morning, experiencing the continuity of consciousness beyond physical dissolution, they would no longer fear the death that religious institutions use as a mechanism of control. If every individual possessed direct personal knowledge that they are an eternal being of light, temporarily housed in matter, the entire system of control and manipulation would evaporate like morning mist. You were never intended to live in ignorance of your true nature. You were never meant to sleep through the very hours that were designed for your liberation and transcendence. You were never meant to wait until physical death to discover what lies beyond the veil of matter. The gateway is absolutely real. The technique is genuinely simple. And tonight, everything can change. But before you practice this technique, there is one additional element you must understand, perhaps the most important element, the reason why this works for some people and fails for others. The secret that separates those who merely hear this information from those who actually use it to transform their existence is remarkably straightforward. The difference is not talent or natural ability. It is not spiritual advancement or karmic status. It is not divine favor or luck. The difference is simple and direct. Those who experience the gateway are those who actually lie down tonight and practice what they have learned. Those who do not experience it are those who say tomorrow, who save this video for later, who allow the archons to whisper doubts that they are not ready yet. You are ready. You have always been ready. The only thing that was missing was the knowledge, and now you possess it. Not because you earned it through spiritual practice, not because you are better than other people, but because something within you called out and the universe answered. That calling is the monad recognizing itself. It is your true nature pulling you toward remembrance and reunion. When darkness falls tonight and the world around you grows quiet, you will face a choice. You can sleep as you have always slept, unconscious and harvested, trapped in dreams designed by forces that do not love you and do not have your well-being as their concern. Or you can do something fundamentally different. You can lie down with clear intention and purpose. You can focus your awareness on the feeling of pure existence. You can observe as your physical body enters the sleep state while your consciousness remains awake and aware. You can walk through the gateway that has been waiting for you since the moment you were born into this dimensional realm. The archons will attempt to prevent you. They will make you feel exhausted before you even begin. They will flood your mind with doubts and skepticism. They will convince you that this is fantasy, that you are being foolish, that nothing will happen. Let them attempt. Their power depends absolutely on your ignorance, and you are no longer ignorant. You now understand what you truly are. You are a spark of the infinite monad. You are a pneumatic being, a being of spirit, temporarily clothed in matter. You are a chosen one, not through external selection by some authority, but through internal recognition of your true nature. The implications of this knowledge extend far beyond your personal experience. When you achieve this separation, when you traverse the gateway and experience direct communion with the monad, you return transformed. You carry that frequency back into your physical body. You begin to radiate a different vibration. People around you sense something different about you, though they cannot articulate what it is. Your presence begins to affect others. Your consciousness begins to influence the collective consciousness. This is how transformation spreads. Not through preaching or convincing others intellectually, but through the radiation of your own transformed state. The ancient mystery schools understood this principle. They knew that one person who had achieved gnosis, direct knowledge, could influence thousands through the simple fact of their presence. This is why the archons have worked so diligently to prevent this knowledge from spreading. One awakened person is manageable. But if this knowledge became widespread, if thousands or millions of people began practicing this technique, the entire control system would collapse. The church understood this. which is why they systematically destroyed the texts that contained this teaching. They understood that if people knew they could access the divine directly, without priestly intermediaries, the entire institutional structure would become irrelevant. They understood that if people knew they were eternal beings of light, they would no longer fear death, and therefore could not be controlled through fear. They understood that if people experienced the reality of non-physical dimensions, they would no longer believe that this material world was the totality of existence. So they burned the texts, they labeled the teachers as heretics, they rewrote history, they created a religion based on faith and belief rather than direct experience and knowledge. And for 2,000 years, this worked. The knowledge was suppressed, the techniques were lost, the gateway was forgotten, but now, in this moment, the knowledge is returning. The texts are being rediscovered, the techniques are being remembered, the gateway is opening again. This is not coincidence. This is the monad calling its fragments back home. This is the universe correcting a 2,000-year suppression. This is the beginning of a great awakening. Your role in this awakening is not passive. You are not meant to simply receive this information and do nothing with it. You are meant to practice. You are meant to experience. You are meant to become a living example of what is possible. When you achieve the separation, when you traverse the gateway, you become a beacon for others. Your transformed state becomes an invitation. Your presence becomes a teaching. Others will sense what you have discovered and will begin to ask questions. They will begin to seek. They will begin to remember. This is how the awakening spreads, not through force or coercion, but through the natural attraction of those who are ready to the frequency of those who have already awakened. The archons cannot stop this process. They can slow it. They can create distractions. They can amplify confusion and fear. But they cannot ultimately prevent the return of the monad's fragments to their source. The process is already in motion. The frequency is already shifting. The gateway is already opening. The actual practice of this technique requires nothing exotic or complicated. You do not need special equipment or elaborate rituals. You do not need to travel to sacred locations or wait for auspicious astronomical alignments. You need only your bed, your intention, and your willingness to practice. The practice begins during the day, long before you lie down to sleep. Throughout your day, practice shifting your awareness from the content of your thoughts to the awareness itself, the consciousness that observes the thoughts. Notice the gap between thoughts, that brief moment of silence before the next thought arises. That gap is the frequency you are cultivating. That silence is the gateway. As you practice this throughout the day, you are training your consciousness to recognize and maintain that frequency. By the time you lie down to sleep, your consciousness is already familiar with the state you are seeking to maintain. When you lie down to sleep, do not immediately close your eyes. Lie in a comfortable position and spend a few minutes observing your breath. Not controlling it, not changing it, simply observing it. Notice the sensation of air moving in and out of your body. Notice the expansion and contraction of your chest. This simple observation begins to shift your consciousness from the thinking mind to the observing awareness. After a few minutes of this, you can close your eyes. Now, shift your attention to the sensation of your body as a whole. Feel the weight of your body on the bed. Feel the contact between your body and the surface beneath you. Feel the temperature of your skin. Feel the subtle vibrations of your heartbeat. You are training your consciousness to remain aware as your body enters the sleep state. As your body begins to relax and your mind begins to quiet, maintain this observing awareness. Do not try to force anything. Do not try to make something happen. Simply observe. Simply maintain awareness. As your body becomes heavier and your mind becomes quieter, you may begin to feel the vibrations I mentioned earlier. You may hear sounds. You may feel a sensation of floating or weightlessness. These are signs that the separation is beginning. Continue to observe. Continue to maintain awareness. Do not panic. Do not try to control what is happening. Simply observe and allow the process to unfold. At some point, you may feel a sensation of movement. as though you are being pulled or lifted. This is the moment of separation. Your consciousness is separating from your physical body. Allow this to happen. Do not resist. Do not try to hold on to your body. Simply allow yourself to be pulled or lifted. You may experience a sensation of moving through a tunnel or a passage. You may see light. You may hear sounds. Continue to move in the direction that feels right, the direction that feels like coming home. As you move through this passage, you may encounter beings or presences. Remember what I said earlier. The true light does not demand. It does not persuade. It simply is. If you encounter something that tries to convince you to go somewhere else or do something else, you can simply say no and continue in the direction that feels right. Eventually, you will emerge into a space of pure light and awareness. This is the monad. This is the source. This is home. Spend as much time here as you wish. Absorb the frequency. Allow yourself to be transformed by the experience. When you are ready to return, simply intend to return to your body. You will find yourself back in your physical form, awake and aware. The first time you do this, you may not achieve complete separation. You may only experience fragments of the process. You may feel the vibrations and then become afraid and snap back into your body. This is normal. This is expected. Do not be discouraged. Each attempt strengthens your ability to maintain awareness through the process. Each attempt brings you closer to full separation. With practice, the process becomes easier and more complete. Eventually, you will achieve full conscious separation and traverse the gateway completely. And once you have done this once, you can do it again and again. Each night becomes an opportunity for liberation, for communion with the source, for transformation. Your life begins to change. Your perspective shifts. Your priorities reorganize. Things that seemed important become trivial. Things that seemed impossible become obvious. You begin to live from a different frequency. You begin to radiate a different vibration. People around you sense the change. Some are attracted to it. Some are repelled by it. This is natural. Not everyone is ready for what you have discovered. Share this knowledge with those who are ready. Do not force it on those who are not. Do not argue with skeptics. Simply live your truth. Simply radiate your frequency. Those who are meant to find this will find it. Those who are meant to hear this will hear it. The monad calls to its own fragments. The frequency recognizes itself. This is how the awakening spreads, not through force or coercion, but through the natural resonance of like frequencies. The archons will attempt to discredit this teaching. They will create false information. They will amplify skepticism and doubt. They will convince people that this is dangerous or delusional. Let them attempt. The truth is not dependent on belief. The gateway is not dependent on skepticism. The monad is not dependent on approval from the archonic system. The truth simply is, and those who are ready will recognize it and practice it and transform. We have arrived at the final element of this teaching, the element that determines whether this information remains merely intellectual knowledge or becomes lived experience and transformation. Everything I have shared with you up to this point is true. The gateway is real. The technique is effective. The monad is calling. But none of this matters if you do not practice. None of this transforms your life if you do not actually lie down tonight and attempt this. The difference between those who achieve liberation and those who remain imprisoned is not intelligence or worthiness or spiritual advancement. The difference is action. The difference is practice. The difference is the willingness to try something new, to risk failure, to step outside the conditioning that has confined you. The archons are counting on your inaction. They are counting on you saying tomorrow, next week, next month. They are counting on you saving this video and never returning to it. They are counting on you sharing this with others, but not practicing it yourself. They are counting on your fear and your doubt and your habitual patterns. Do not give them what they are counting on. Do not wait. Do not delay. Tonight, when darkness falls, do something different. Tonight, Lie down with intention. Tonight, practice what you have learned. Tonight, attempt to traverse the gateway. You may succeed completely. You may experience only fragments. You may feel only the vibrations and then become afraid. Whatever happens, you will have taken the first step. You will have begun the process. You will have activated the frequency. And once activated, that frequency cannot be deactivated. Once you have begun to remember, you cannot completely forget. The monad within you will continue to call. The gateway will continue to open. The frequency will continue to shift. Over time, with practice, you will achieve full separation. You will traverse the gateway. You will experience direct communion with the Source. You will return transformed. Your life will never be the same. Your perspective will shift. Your priorities will reorganize. Your consciousness will expand. You will begin to understand things that cannot be explained in words. You will begin to perceive realities that are invisible to ordinary consciousness. You will begin to live from a frequency that most people cannot even imagine. And as you transform, you become a beacon for others. Your presence becomes an invitation. Your frequency becomes a teaching. Others will sense what you have discovered and will begin to ask questions. They will begin to seek. They will begin to remember. This is how the awakening spreads. This is how the monad calls its fragments back home. This is how the 2,000-year suppression is overcome. The time for this awakening is now. The frequency is shifting. The gateway is opening. The monad is calling. You have been given the knowledge. You have been given the technique. You have been given the invitation. What you do with this is your choice. You can ignore it and continue sleeping. You can share it with others, but not practice it yourself. Or you can practice it. You can traverse the gateway. You can experience direct communion with the Source. You can become a living example of what is possible. You can become a beacon for others. You can participate in the great awakening that is occurring on this planet right now. The choice is yours. But know this, the monad within you is already calling. The frequency is already shifting. The gateway is already opening. Whether you consciously participate or not, the process is already in motion. But if you participate, if you practice, if you traverse the gateway, your life will be transformed. Your consciousness will expand. Your understanding will deepen. You will become what you were always meant to be, a conscious, aware, liberated being of light, temporarily housed in matter, but no longer imprisoned by it. Share this with the one person who comes to mind right now. They found their way to you for the same reason you found your way here. They are ready. They are remembering. They are being called. Subscribe if you want to go deeper into these teachings, and leave the word awake in the comments so others can find their tribe, so others can recognize the frequency and begin their own journey of remembrance and liberation. The gateway opens tonight. The choice is yours. Walk through.